So thanks for inviting me out. Who are you?
I'm Mike Agnich. I'm the CTO here at Predictify. Predictify is we like to call a prediction platform. So we started the company with the realization that all the information online was really about past events. When you went to read blogs, you were reading about things which had already happened. When you were searching for information, you were always looking backwards, and we thought there was just an incredible amount of information that was really forward-looking, and started thinking about ways to address that and use the power of the internet to do that. So my co-founder and I started Predictify out of school. We were both at business school at Stanford, and we just on a Friday afternoon we met about it, started talking. A couple weeks later we started drawing up the plans for making the site, and within a month we were writing code.
So I have a sense of what you do. It's sort of studying a group of people and what they think will happen. So like sports or stocks.
It can be sports, it can be stocks, it can be pop culture. Really, where we see a lot of interest on the site today is
like how much time is Britney Spears going to do, or something like that?
Yes, we've had those questions. We've had, how much time was Michael Vick going to do? All those questions are quite popular. Politics questions, obviously, it's kind of the flavor of the day. So we have an awful lot of activity about the presidential.
So Obama versus Hillary versus McCain kind of thing?
Obama versus Hillary versus McCain, all the different states. And then, there's a million questions that come up beyond that. Who's going to be the vice presidential candidate? When is the Democratic nominee going to finally be determined? All those things. So because we really let our users ask the questions, they really come from directions we don't expect.
And can you give me some sense of like how accurate this is and how the accuracy varies from genre to genre? Because sports will be different. I assume will be different than politics, and that'll be different than the weather. Yeah. Well, you can't predict stuff like the weather or earthquakes, right?
Well, I think there are some cool companies out there trying to do weather. It's not exactly what we're doing, but one of the theories with weather is that all knowledge is local, and that if you can address local markets, that you can actually do a good job of doing things like that. But for us, what we really do is we focus on making all of our questions what we call deterministic and measurable with their outcomes. And what that lets us do, instead of asking a question, what should I have for dinner tonight, or which of these 5 shirts do you think looks best, we focus on measurable events. So
like who's going to beat the 49ers going to win this Sunday?
Yeah, or how many wins will they have over the season? Will they win this weekend? Will Britney be back in jail by the end of the year? So on. What that lets us do is in each of these verticals, and we really have 6 categories. We wanted to keep that kind of narrowly defined. Sports and pop culture, business, politics, I'm missing one, and then there's another category. Within each of these categories, when you predict what's going to happen, when that event happens, because all these things are measurable, we can actually score our entire base. And
so I bet some people are better predictors than others, right? Because that's the way human behavior works, right?
That is
20% of the people do 80% of the work, I guess.
Right. So that's really getting at our core belief, which is the best indicator of future predictive prowess is historic predictive prowess. So within each of these categories, over time, you start to build a reputation. And it's not just about how close you were to the answer, but we consider time, because we assume that over time more information becomes available, so an earlier prediction is better than a later prediction. And the other piece we bring to bear in a big way is historic performance.
Yeah.
So we can filter results on the back end based on how well people have done historically, within sports, within politics, individually. And what you find in terms of accuracy is that when you cut out the people we call beginners, and you cut out the people we call apprentices, almost always when you look back after something is closed, the higher level people almost always tend to be the most accurate.
Yep. What kind of, so let's say for sports, what kind of population generally does the best? Are you learning about a certain kind of person that does great at sports, or a certain kind of person that does great at politics? Is it somebody who was an NFL coach, for instance, who really understands the game, or a player, or somebody who was really inside the game? Or is it somebody like me or Rocky or you who are fans and just enjoy watching the game and maybe built up some intuition about what was going to go down on Sunday?
I think the way we address that issue is because we throw it out to the general public. If you've got a question about Microsoft's stock price, you're going to get some people who know an awful lot about what's going to happen with Microsoft's stock price. Not all of them are talking on Fox News or CNN or whatever.
Right.
And they're going to participate. And the people who do know these things over time are going to be more accurate. Now, it's up to us on the back end to use behavior on the site, use activity on the site, to pick out the gems from the haystack and understand that today we're talking about very broad categories, business. But as we get bigger and we get more questions, we're going to continually get finer and eventually be able to identify people who consistently get Microsoft questions correctly and consistently get Dallas Cowboys questions correct.
Now, if Bill Gates was participating in the system, would we know it's Bill Gates, or no. So it's anonymous to? So Bill could be playing along, and we just don't know that it's him. We were talking a little bit before the camera turned on that you compare all the results to some sort of baseline as well. So you have some way to measure whether Predictify's community is doing better than a baseline. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I'd say we really use those tools internally to kind of fine tune our incentive system. We really believe that the way we set up incentives on the site is going to drive accuracy. It's going to drive the right kind of behavior that we want to see out of our users.
Right. So like with them and with Microsoft stock, what would the baseline measure be? Would that be the market?
Probably the market. In the case of financial questions, if you're talking about stock price, the market is perhaps the most perfect futures market in terms of financial activity you could ever hope for. In sports, the Vegas line is probably your best baseline. In other cases, when you start talking about politics, when you start talking about pop culture, that's especially true. Sometimes it's hard to identify what that baseline is. There is no known and recognized pop culture governing board that determines what the chance,
Perez Hilton.
That's probably the closest thing, right? You get TMZ, Perez Hilton, whatever it is,
Do you try to predict what Perez is going to write about tomorrow?
I think it's
or what Mike Arrington in our industry is going to write about tomorrow.
We get those questions, we do, and so it's whatever the flavor of the day is, it comes very quickly into the site as predictive questions.
Now, let's say I am Bill Gates. I'm not, but let's say I was. What's my incentive to participate in the system? Do I get points? Do I get prizes? Why do I come and participate in the system?
It's really kind of three things. The first is reputation, because we allow you to really go on record with these events and predict what's going to happen. You get to build kind of a reputation. I'm a politics guru. I'm a business beginner. And that sticks with you. So people are just inherently interested in prognosticating and building reputation. Second is competition. We have tools in the site which allow you to compete against your friends and over time actually build kind of a win-loss record against your friends. So if you're got a small group of political buffs, you guys can argue about what's going to happen and go on record and see who's right. Third, there are really two kinds of questions on Predictify. The first is really the crowdsourced free questions. And these are questions that are asked by you and me and everybody else. Makes up the majority of the site, but we also have premium sponsored questions. And these questions are asked by consumer products companies, they're asked sometimes by political organizations, charities, a lot of things. And they pay, and for that they get a much deeper look at the data, and they get some additional tools and rights to syndicate and things like that. But on those paid questions, when you predict what's going to happen there, we also allow larger sample sizes in those questions. We actually take a chunk of what Predictify gets and we pay it out to the predictors based on how well they do on these questions, because we can measure it. And that's where this expert level really starts to matter. If you and I both predict the exact same thing at the exact same time, but you're a guru within that category and I'm a beginner, you're going to earn 4 times as much money as I am.
Interesting.
So we really incentivize people to participate in a quality way rather than just trying to get as many predictions out there as fast as they can.
Yeah. When you said an advertiser gets a much deeper look at the stats, give me a sense of what else they get.
Sure. We allow anybody who sponsors a question to ask demographics, and so we'll be able to filter. If you go to any free question on Predictify, you can always filter by level, by historic accuracy, this thing we've been talking about. But sponsored questions, we allow things like age and gender and all these other things. So you can start to see how the distribution of beliefs shifts. So males over the age of 40 think this, women under 20 think this. And we give them all these tools to really dive deep into this data so that they can actually do customer segmentation in line with marketing. They can do.
Now, are you doing this with the presidential campaign then?
Sure.
So you can tell certain demographics pick Hillary Clinton and other demographics pick Barack Obama. How does what you're seeing in your system match up with the national polling? Because they're trying to do the same kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
the trends for that question, I can't honestly come out and say we're seeing something totally different than what the other people are saying. We can look at an example of exactly that question in a little bit, but you see things. You see on racial bounds, sometimes you do see Hispanics tend to favor Hillary versus Barack, and you can really play with all this and get down deep into it. What is interesting when you do filter by this historic performance on a question like that, you see what are clearly outliers kind of fall away, and you start to see a couple of possibilities, which are really the prime possibilities. I think the one of the questions which I think is really interesting isn't just who's going to win, but when will a Democratic nomination be decided, and who will it be decided for? So it's like June Obama, June Clinton, and so on. And you can see that there are really kind of two possibilities that sort of emerge, that people think one of these two things is going to happen.
Yeah. How big does the sample size, or how big does the community have to be before you start seeing some good accuracy? And give me a sense of how many people are showing up, and what's happening to your accuracy rates.
Yeah. So the answer to the accuracy question is a bit of a loaded one, because anybody who knows a lot about statistics knows it depends on the question. Depends on how many answer choices
there's
you
lies,
have.
And then there's lies, or statistics, and then there's lies.
Yeah. So there's typically once you get a couple of hundred people who are participating in a single prediction, you're starting to get a pretty decent sample size for saying within kind of a 5% margin of error. But it does depend heavily on the question. If you have a binary question where 95% of the people think in one way, it's actually harder to get statistically significant. But that's going down a rat hole we probably don't want to touch on right now. But it's really a couple hundred before you start to get a pretty powerful view of what people think is going to happen. And it also depends on which demographics you're getting and so on. So the guys like Gallup and Pew and Forrester, they do a great job of making sure they get cross-demographic and so on. And sometimes they fail. Yeah. And that's where kind of our solution can step in and say, you know what, we're trying to address a wide band of people. We're not going to filter them out by demographic on the front, but on the back, if you want to filter them out to see different results and how they correlate to the responses, then we let you do that.
But what kind of biases are you seeing in the system? I imagine you have an early adopter bias, right? So if you ask, is HDTV going to win? You're probably going to get a lot more answers yes than if you ask normal people on the street.
I think the fact that the elections are happening now has helped us a lot in terms of getting a better spread of demographics. When we look, we have actually a very good age spread when we look at that. And we're not just getting kind of the early adopter, whatever that crowd may be. Gender is, we're more male than female. We are still a very young company. We expect that to even out over time. But some of the early deals we did, for example, we did an integration with the New York Times about the NFL playoffs. When you ask you get a lot of people in about the NFL playoffs, that tends to have a certain demographic. And so, we do have an early adopter crowd, but a lot of the questions on the site are fairly cerebral. And that tends to attract a more mature audience in some cases.
Are you tracking like how Google is sharing their social networks now? They just announced that this week, which this video will be up in probably a month after Google Friend Connect was announced. But are you looking at stuff like that so that you could hook into like Facebook and study their demographic behavior and pull those into Predictify and compare? sort of the demographics you're learning about people?
I think we are, one of our biggest initiatives right now is to figure out how we want to kind of expand from within our destination site, how we want to integrate with some of these other guys and reach out and address different demographics and understand those communities. So I think we've got some pretty exciting things coming, but we're tracking very carefully all the new, we're cheering for open networks. It helps us a lot.
Okay, and it's a free service, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a web page right now, so you don't have a client that sits in the corner that I can keep voting on all day long, along with Twitter or something like that. Are you looking at doing anything like that so that people can, particularly sports fanatics, are like, you know, I know Rocky would probably be there all day long rating hockey games. Right. You know? Sharks. Yeah.
Right? We give you the ability to really manage what emails you want to receive, and we have, if you choose to receive them, what's really cool is when these questions finish, when the results of a primary, when it's known and we can close these questions, we can send out an email to the entire base saying, here's what you predicted, here's how you did, if it's premium, here's how much money you made, here's where you can go to see what everybody else thought and how they ranked in the whole scheme of things. So it's a really powerful way to bring people back into the site that we've seen work very well. Yeah. In terms of a client, it's not on the drawing board today, but wouldn't rule it out.
Now, before we started the cameras up, you said that the accuracy you were seeing on, let's say, football scores was better than the Las Vegas bookies. Mm-hmm. Why is that? And why haven't they figured out how to do what you're doing? Yeah. What about your sample is bringing it, or your audience is bringing a better result?
Well, the Vegas line, and this is something near and dear to my heart, is not really a line that's supposed to predict what's going to happen. The Vegas line is the thing which they set the line where they're pretty sure they're going to make money. It's a slightly different thing. So if you have a very popular team, maybe it's the Patriots, I don't know. Patriots are going to tend, sometimes, it's a theory, to be overvalued on the Vegas line because you're going to have more people betting on them, emotionally betting on them, instead of simply trying to guess who's going to win. The way we frame our questions and the way we do our rewards, we're asking the question, not who do you want to win, but who do you think is going to win? And you know, I can't say for sure why we tend to do better, but throughout the playoffs, we beat the line. I think in all but one game, we beat the Vegas line in terms of what was going to happen. I think it has a lot to do with how we word the questions, how we try to disassociate the person from the question. And we're not asking what do you want to happen. And in Vegas, a lot of people kind of bet on their team. We're asking what do you think will happen, and that's true for all questions.
Interesting. So, how can somebody use that then to play the system? And I mean, obviously, if you know that next year you're going to have the same results, which is not guaranteed, right? You could go. Couldn't you build a system to buy bets in Las Vegas and make money that way?
You know, I think it's certainly not what we focus on as a company, but you know, it certainly could be an arbitrage opportunity in that regard. If you believe in the wisdom of crowds like we do, it could be.
So is that what you're doing on the weekends?
No time right now.
Can you give me a sense of what this looks like to use and what kind of data I would get?
So here's, let's see, how do we want to do this? So this is actually one of the results that you would see. This question is, I think I alluded to it earlier, about the Democratic nominee. So on the y-axis here, you have all the different possibilities. And the x-axis, I think this question has almost 6,000 predictions. So what we do on a larger question like this is we take a sample of the population and we display them on this chart. So you can see not just what people thought, but you can go in here and people have the opportunity to actually kind of go on record and actually kind of in this bubble format say what they're going to say. We see incredibly high levels of comments on the site. One of the things we're really proud of is that as a ratio, logins to comments today is about 1.4. So pretty much for every 3 logins we have, we get 2 comments.
Interesting.
And it's not just in this format, but on the main page as well. We give people a lot of opportunity to argue about what they think, and when they do argue about it, we put their prediction right there. So it's not, you don't get a lot of trolling. Of course you get some of that, but most of it is people defending their response.
Interesting.
So very kind of vibrant.
So this is time of prediction along the bottom, and what's on the left
These
side?
These are the options. So this here is people who thought Obama would be decided in April, Clinton would be decided in April, and so on. So I'll show the distribution in a minute, which gives you a very different look at this data. But you can start to see.
Now, see, this doesn't make sense because when is the Democratic?
The convention is August, so we only have responses up to this line so far. So that'll continue to grow over time.
Got it. Okay.
So if we look at a kind of a different view to the same data here, this is going to show us the entire distribution of beliefs. So this here, we take a very different look at it. Instead of kind of scatter plot, we're looking at a histogram.
Okay.
And so here, what you can really see very clearly, the most popular choice, the most popular prediction is that Obama will clinch it in June, followed by Obama in May. And there are some interesting things. So here you see that there's kind of an outlier, which is fairly popular, that people think there's a shot that Clinton could get it in August. And that's probably because they think that if Clinton does get it, it won't be until August.
Yeah.
So you see some of these spikes. You can start to do some pretty interesting things here. And like I talked about, you can start to filter out beginners, and you start to look at these are the people who historically have done well in politics. And you see that some of these things start to be even more pronounced, and some of the outliers start to fall away. And then, if you want to, you can then do things like, show me our top female predictors.
Oh, that's
and so
interesting.
on. So you start to see some bigger shifts when you start to kind of cut down the population. But if we put everybody back in, and we go to gender, and you can do kind of male female, it's pretty uniform. You don't see a huge shift here. We may be able to find another question where you see a bigger shift on gender lines.
Wow.
So those are two the
now, does everybody using the system have access to this?
Everybody can see this. Typically, typically for most free questions, you would only see level of expertise. But sometimes, and this is the case, when a sponsored question is asked, when a sponsored question is asked, they can choose to make all the results public.
Got it.
And this is what happens.
So who sponsored this question then?
We can't really talk about that stuff.
Oh, really?
So there are some groups who might be interested in these kind of answers who aren't really interested in people knowing that they're asking these kinds of questions.
So it could be a Democratic committee or somebody, or a Republican committee who wants to know how their internal systems are matching up with your system.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that is, this is really, this would be kind of a market research use, but we actually see the market research as kind of secondary to our model, where we see the most inbound interest for premium questions actually come from consumer products companies, typically companies who have trouble selling online, who don't match up well with the services offered by Google and Yahoo.
Yeah.
Talking here, companies like really brain-conscious companies. I'll provide some examples, and I'm not trying to insinuate we're working with them now, but Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Pfizer, Pfizer, GM, Paramount.
I was
Pictures.
not paid for that either.
Yeah.
Although if Coca-Cola wants to sponsor my show, there.
And these companies are just desperate to get people engaged in their brand message. So GM, people don't buy cars online. So your pay-per-click to drive people to the GM site, it's not terribly effective. And it's the same for all these companies. And they've been desperate for a long time to find a good way for them to do what we coin engagement advertising. They're spending their money still on television and radio.
Yeah.
And we come in here and we allow a movie studio, if they've got a movie coming out in 6 weeks, to post a trailer of a movie and ask, how well do you think this is going to do? And it's opening weekend. Now, they don't even really care about the results. What they're trying to do is they pay $5,000, they're going to get, 25,000 page views to the question, 5,000 predictions, 600 comments, 3,500 click-throughs to their website, a whole lot of people arguing about how this movie is going to do. And then all of a sudden, without even knowing it to a certain degree, these people are engaging in the message they're trying to present. And what we found is, even on the questions which are obviously commercial in nature, our users love them because they have an opportunity to make money. These are all sponsored questions. They can come in here and they can predict how that movie's going to do. They can predict what percentage of of Saturn whatever purchasers are going to choose to get the leather seats optionally, whatever it is. Because they'll go in there, and in the GM example and Saturn example, they'll learn about this car, they're going to look at it, they're going to understand how much it costs, they're going to do all this stuff, really get engaged in this decision. It's something that GM can't do with existing marketing methods. And so we are kind of in pilot stage with a lot of these guys right now. We are still a very young company, and really.
Now, yesterday on Facebook, I got asked a similar question: which brand of toothpaste do you like? Which isn't a predictive question, but it's an engagement kind of advertising, which is real interesting. So, are you going to do that kind of advertising for like MySpace or Facebook or Orkut or whatnot? It's to stick a little gadget in a page.
It's a direction we're definitely thinking about. So we're learning a lot from our potential partners right now, and we're reaching out and exploring a lot of things.
Interesting. Anything else I need to know?
Let me just spend another kind of 30 seconds or so and just show kind of some of the other features here. So, one of the things we do is kind of a friends feed here where you can keep track of what your friends are predicting and how they're doing and so on. Here is my kind of my rankings. I've done pretty well.
Yeah.
These
now
are
the friends. Are these real people's names?
Yeah.
Then? So you can choose to make your name public if you want.
That's right.
So I could use Robert Scoble.
That's right.
Could I get a widget from my blog so all my blog readers are going to come along and say, "Hey, Robert actually tries to predict, is Microsoft going to buy Yahoo or be successful in doing that? Yes or no?" And you can see his predictions over time.
Well, the way we've approached blog owners is actually something we think is actually a lot more compelling than that. And we spent a good amount of time on the engineering front developing what we call platform, and it's not really the same as Facebook platform, but what it allows you to do in about 5 minutes is to create really a branded page, which sits on our servers, but it could be robertscoble.predictify.com, and you can customize all the questions there. You can have your own leaderboard, your own experts, whatever it is. So we actually are, I can't show you the site, but we're working with Mashable, for example, and what they love about it is they have a blog post, then you can ask a question and you can tie the two. So instead of just reading, you're actually engaging in the question. And we are kind of going through a very big revamp, and what we're kind of calling version 2 of the site right now. For example, the homepage is up there right now.
That's interesting. So Mashable is going to ask, today, when will the new 3G iPhone come out?
Actually, that
June, July, August, or something like that. And what if I asked the same question to my readers, June, July? Can we compare our communities and see who has the more accurate community? Interesting. So,
when you have one of these pages, you can choose to keep that question private or push it out to our public domain. And so if you only wanted your users to address it, that's all there. It's out of the box.
But could I see a chart of, because if I see Mashable asking a question, can I immediately ask the same question on my blog?
You could.
And then show a graph of who, what Mashable's community said and what my community said, and then after the iPhone comes out in August, let's say, hey, we beat Mashable's community.
You'd have to do probably some Photoshop work to put them side by side. We don't allow you to kind of say, compare this to this.
Oh, you should. Because that would be a smackdown. Who has the more accurate community, Valleywag or TechCrunch?
We got to think about whether we want to get in the middle of that. Right?
But Rocky, this is our new business here.
So this is so you see my
so one more minute. Anything else that we need to know?
No, I don't need to go any deeper than that. There's a lot of really interesting questions on the site. So like I said, everything you can imagine, there's pretty much a question about it. We got questions about UFOs and Mars, and we got a question about Britney Spears and questions about Google stock price. So pretty broadly appealing, I think, and we hope it's going to do well.
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to playing with this and kicking Pete Cashmore's butt. Thanks for inviting me over.
Thank you.